Okay. So where do we want to start from? Do you want me to finish?
Yeah, John, just finish talking about yourself here for a minute.
Okay, so I was like I said, I work on accounts in Oregon and Idaho, but I do have some area expertise that gets me pulled into other states in the region and also nationwide. Been at this for 34 years. First 7 years of state of Oregon, and then ever since then with Esri. So let me go back to David here. David, if you can hear, introduce yourself. David.
I don't see him on the chat.
Okay, let's go. We'll
keep
moving ahead here. Eric.
Hi, I'm Eric McAvoy. I work for Polk County, Oregon. I run the GIS shop here. I've been here for 6 years, and my my area of GIS is everything that the county does. Because for a long time we were a one-person shop, and now we are a two-person shop, sort of. Yeah, I mainly focus in web apps and ArcGIS Enterprise and implementation there, and building applications for small editing and that sort of a thing. So yeah, and now David, I see him now.
Yes,
so.
1 second.
All right, David, we're going to start with your
all right, well,
your slide. Introduce yourself.
Yes, okay, 2 seconds. I'm sorry, everybody, my power went out, and that made for a very exciting start, and I was worried that this could happen. Okay, I'm just going to I'll switch slides, John, because
okay, let me stop sharing mine.
yeah, all right, just starting them now.
All right, you got it.
All right, thank you. Start that, just bring it up, and you started at ArcGIS Pro there, okay. And I just got to share my screen. I'm going to find the Zoom thing here. All right, two. All right, you can all see that, okay? Okay, this is a this is a test of whether or not I'm prepared. You know, you have to allow for situations like this, I suppose, and hope that it works, you know. All right, like I said, I'm very, very sorry about that. I wasn't sure, and I had certain power outlets on and certain weren't, and I went and played with the switch box, and that's what I did, and lights started coming on and things, and so luckily that worked. All right, well, let's get straight into it, and thank you, gentlemen, for taking over there and keeping this moving. So ArcGIS Pro overview. There we go. It's different and it's familiar. So we had a slide earlier, which I hope you saw, where we thanked Randy for his slides. And Randy has been talking about ArcGIS Pro for a few years now, and a migration, and we've come back to back almost in conferences doing it. And then the last time I joked that he would have nothing to say because I had said it all in my session before him. But I also suggested that we should join forces and do something the next time. Now, he couldn't do that because he's very busy running the show, which is fantastic, and well done for that. And so he gave us his slides and said you could use whatever you want. So thank you for that. And Dave Jacobus will mention some of his content, and I will too. So he has a big slide, and it says it's different on it, and in huge letters. And I would add it's different and it's familiar as well. And the reason I say that is this: is that right down here you have in the middle a map, okay, and then you have a table of contents contents, and then over on the right hand side you have a catalog, and then you have all the functionality that's associated with those things. And that's where things start to get a little bit unfamiliar, but once you dig in there, you'll find that things are pretty much as you expect. So if you look at select here, select by attributes, location, and that kind of stuff, adding base maps, bookmarks, all the usual stuff from ArcGIS desktop is there, plus an absolute ton more. It's really a very powerful program. Now, one thing to notice here, though, is you've got 2 maps, and you can have as many maps as you want. As I think there might be a limit, but it might just be how much your machine can handle. But anyway, you can have multiple maps in here, and that's I think goes back to a request from ArcView back in the 90s. And so it took a while, but now we have more maps. So next thing, if you look at some things like tables, what you have over here, this is a dock pane. It's called a dock pane. This is a dock pane technically. And then you have this ribbon up at the top, and then you have these multiple tabs. And if you go to the open a table, you'll see this fields tab opens. Now, this is a multi-threaded application. There's lots of things happening at the same time, and that's what makes it really responsive. And when I talked about this last time in depth, I completely failed to mention that, which is a bit surprising, because that's one of the most powerful things about ArcGIS Pro, is not just the modern look and feel and all the extra functionality, but it's the fact that the UI doesn't become unresponsive when you do things. So we all remember the days when we would start a geoprocessing tool and it would run for 16 hours and we couldn't do anything else while ArcGIS Pro is running because it's just locked up doing some geoprocessing tasks. Well, that can't happen anymore for the reason that the processes are sent to background threads and off they go and do their thing. And so when you're programming, as I'll talk about later, and developing your own extensions to this program, you're blocked from doing anything bad as well. They just simply won't let you do it. So that's a really important feature of ArcGIS Pro. So anyway, when we going back to the tables here, this is the tables fields designer view. It's called a view. So this thing that occupies this whole space here, and the map is a view as well. And this is much more powerful than what we had before for ArcMap and ArcCatalog. So you can move tables around, move fields around in there, switch things on off and do things in a very nice way. That's much, much better. Editing is what's called on-demand in ArcGIS Pro, and that's a term I heard an Esri person use. I would just say it's available all the time, in that you can go in to the Edit tab here, and then you can go and choose Create Features. I hope you can see my cursor there. You can choose Create Features. This pane over here will open, and you can just click on Create a Feature and start clicking away to your heart's content. And so it's right there. You've got to be careful with that. You know, I think in the old days we might have thought that would be a bit dangerous, but it's not at all. It's absolutely powerful and very helpful. Arcade. Arcade is not a fairground ride in this case. It's a scripting language that Esri created for very solid reasons. It has to do with providing scripting capabilities in a consistent manner across their entire platform. So you will have heard of Arcade throughout. And when you have, in this case, a label class being generated, I've got a doc pane over here, and I've got some code down here for the expression. This just says append the state code and the name together, just concatenate them to create a label that you see there. This is Arcade, but you can use Arcade for millions of other things. It's extremely powerful. You can use it for pop-ups. You can use it for configuration in dashboards, for example. You can use it for calculates. So if you have a calculate field tool open and you enter expressions in there, you can use Arcade. So it's very powerful. And some people might say, well, why do we need another scripting language? Well, the reason is that it has to do with providing capabilities on mobile devices and on desktop and web applications as well. It was one of those things where there really wasn't a suitable alternative, and we can go into more of that later.
Yeah, so David, just for quickly, a couple of things like that. We couldn't use JavaScript because you can't secure JavaScript, which was an issue. And we also couldn't use Python because in order to move it all over the entire platform, so web applications, all those downstream things, you have to have the Python libraries, which are too big to install. So that's why we ended up doing Arcade.
Funny you should say that, John. I was about to say exactly that, but I
Okay.
resisted. No, you're all right. Thank you for that, though. Yes. But Arcade is very impressive. Well worth learning. Attribute rules. Now, I have a basic license here, and it says right here, attribute rules are read-only with the basic license. So I can't do an awful lot with attribute rules myself. I have a developer subscription. But if you have more than the basic license, you can create what you used to be able to create through the attribute assistant in Arc. There was an extension, basically, to ArcMap. And what attribute rules do is they allow you to trigger certain actions on other data in your database based on, say, for example, creating a feature. So let's say we have a utility network and we had a new pipe, and maybe the dimensions of that pipe and some other metadata gets filled in. So that's an example of a calculation attribute rule. You could also have a constraint that would prevent the user through maybe one of your apps that would prevent them creating values that they shouldn't. So it's kind of works with domains there and those kind of rules. And then the other one is validation, checking that a correct value was entered. Okay, so attribute rules are a big, powerful feature of ArcGIS Pro, but you need the right licensing to work with them. Geoprocessing, so my favorite thing here, I suppose. Over here on the right, we have the select tool open in one of these panes. And for those of you who are used to ArcMap and have worked with it for years, it looks very similar, except for one thing. Down here, this expression box is really nice. It has that same expression building capability that you see with definition queries as well in here, where you can build up clauses in a very nice fashion, and you can work with SQL and that sort of thing. So that's an improvement there. And the other thing is, this is a reason to keep with the latest version. So if you're on, for example, ArcGIS Pro 2.5, you wouldn't see down here this reset parameters and copy Python command when you go to the run. The run button we had the execute button, I think, for ArcMap geoprocessing tools. Now we have the run button, and for up until 2.5, 2.6 or whenever, that was just a straight button. Now it's a split button, and you'll see that happen a lot throughout the interface. The buttons become split buttons, which means that you can click on a little arrow here, click the drop down, and you'll get multiple options. In this case, there are 4. Run, schedule, reset parameters. So that's nice, because you used to have to close the tool and reopen it again, and then copy Python command. And that means that you can copy and make a command out of this, send it to geoprocessing window, the Python window, and you don't have to run the tool first. So that's just it seems such a small thing, but it's really great and powerful. And these came about in 2.7, 2.8, I think it was. So keep the latest version, look at what's new, it's important. And so here we have the Python window, and with this little dark down here, but you can see this PyAnalysis select. So this is the statement I just copied and I put right here. Python is front and central in ArcGIS Pro. Okay, that's really important. In ArcMap, it was something of an add-on about halfway through the life, starting in the mid 2000s, I guess, came about to 10.9, I think it was. So it was a bit of an add-on in response to the need and the demand for some kind of scripting capability, because ArcObjects is for weird people like me, I suppose. So, but in ArcGIS Pro, Python is front and center and is hugely powerful. You can do a million things with it. So if you're not learning Python, I encourage you to do so. And if you want to learn Python very soon, join me on Friday. I have a workshop as part of this conference. And then the following Friday, I have another workshop to do with tools and processes. So those two go together. And there's also a third one on November the 8th on JavaScript and TypeScript. So it's not too late to join, and I would love to have you along. So there you are, little promo there, but it is part of the conference. Now, behind the scenes, what's happening here is we have what's called the Python package manager. In ArcGIS Desktop, there is one Python installation, as it's called. There is Python 2.7. In ArcGIS Pro, we can have multiple installations. So it's become all the rage in the last 5-10 years that you, instead of just having one Python installation on your machine, one folder full of code, basically. You can have multiple, and they're each tailored to different kinds of work. So it might be data science, geology, ArcGIS stuff, whatever it happens to be. And so Python, ArcGIS Pro allows for that. And in this Python package manager, you can control what are called environments, installations that you have, and what packages are in there. And here's another example of a split button that somewhat demoted the Python window, I feel. So normally you had a Python button up here on the analysis tab, and you click on that and this window would open. Well, now it's a split button, and the default action is if you just click on the button, this notebook appears. This is a Jupyter notebook. It was an open source thing, presumably still is, I suppose. And this notebook opens, and this is a full-on Jupyter notebook that interacts with the rest of your ArcGIS Pro environment. So very, very powerful there and very impressive. And you can also have these notebooks in ArcGIS Online and Enterprise too. And so this is another data science kind of outcome, I suppose, because people have really got into this stuff. You'll see it in machine learning and all that kind of thing as well. Great way to learn Python and to store things, document things. So my other piece here, which I'll move along to fairly quickly, is configuration and customization. So big feature of ArcGIS Pro, it's highly extensible, okay? There's lots of things you can do at different levels to change the look and feel of it, to add extra functionality, to streamline processes and that sort of thing. And one of the simpler ones in principle is project templates, which I'll come to in a second. You can customize the ribbon. Tasks are wizard-like sequences of operations to support workflows, and there isn't really equivalent in ArcGIS Desktop. They're a new thing. Python tools, which I just mentioned, and then it's what's called the ArcGIS Pro SDK for .NET. This is Microsoft.NET. This is the technology underlying ArcGIS Pro. So that's why ArcGIS Pro looks familiar. It's based on the Microsoft technology. That's the same technology used for the desktop Office products. And you can create what are called add-ins and configurations, which we'll look at. So here's project template. This looks a bit boring, but there's a button right here, project template. And what will happen is if I start to change things in here, in catalog, for example, I add folder connections, database connections, all that sort of thing. And then I create a project template. This is essentially a snapshot. It's an XML file, I'm sure, behind the scenes. It's a snapshot of what the UI looks like, and my layout and that kind of stuff. And that will get saved either locally or it'll get saved in your enterprise portal or in ArcGIS Online if you don't have one of those. And so one or the other you can choose. So templates are a great way to save the state and then reuse them to start the application. If you're setting up a workflow for somebody, for example, you could have a template geared towards them. So that's nice. Now, if you click, there was a button in the top, the project tab rather, if you click on that, you get to this backstage area, as it's called, and you can see you have some options down here, portals, licensing options, Python, and so on. So the Python window that we just saw earlier, that package manager, I arrived there by clicking on this button. And then the options here, we'll just look at one or two of those. So this is project current settings. An ArcGIS Pro project is really just a collection of things in a folder. And so that folder is specified here by this location, this ArcGIS Pro demo. In this case, you have a file geodatabase, a toolbox, that sort of thing. And there could be other resources in there as well. But you can make changes here. So this is how you could use ArcGIS Pro a little bit like ArcMap. You could be in one project, but change all these things to a completely different one, and you just carry on working away there. That's useful to know that. General application ones here. When ArcGIS Pro starts, for example, show the start page without a template, so you can ignore that project template that we talked about, with a default project. I use that all the time. Now, I have a couple of requests for Esri here. One is that in this drop-down list, I just want to pick from all my recent projects. And the other one is that I want to open with the last project, because that would just save me specifying anything. I just always open the last project. If you like that, go to arcgisideas.com, look for my name in there, and you'll see those requests and vote for them. I'd be very grateful if you did, because I think that'd be very useful. So lots of other ones there. to play with. This is the customize the ribbon that I mentioned before. So I had this situation where I was doing a lot of editing, working away, and I got frustrated because I kept having to go to the map tab. Now, this I think is a common complaint with ArcGIS Pro for people who haven't played with it before, and a source of resistance, I guess. They say, well, yeah, but I can't find anything because it's what's called a contextual application. Functionality is made available to you as you need it, not just given to you all at once. Okay, so you click around and you look for things and you struggle, but no, it's all geared towards being available when you need it and then hidden away when you don't. But in this case, I wanted that measure distance tool and it was on the map tab, the map instead. And so I would be editing away, trying to create a feature. Then I'd have to go to the map tab. Then I'd choose measure distance with a drop down thing. And it would just be a pain. And I was going backwards and forwards. And all of a sudden I realized like, well, duh, you know, I can go and change that. So I can go into this form here, get the measure distance tool, and I can add it to the edit tab in this case. And bingo, it's available to me personally, not everybody else, just me. And I have it available to me. So here we are, here's the map tab here, here's measure distance, and I want that on the edit tab, and bingo, there it is over there. So no excuse at all for claiming that you can't find things, because if you want it somewhere, you just go and bring it in. You have that option. Tasks, okay, tasks here. This is an authoring designer, if you like, over here, where I can create these wizard-like pages of sequences. I can have interaction with the map and so on. And then over here, I would have a list of my tasks and ability to control it, delete it, do all that kind of stuff. So if you're interested at all in automating workflows for yourself or other people, and you don't want to play with Python, then this is a great way to go. Scripts and toolboxes, like I said, come along Friday and the following Friday if you want to learn all about this stuff. This stuff in principle is pretty much identical and almost in appearance actually to the way it worked in ArcMap. So, you know, when you're learning this stuff, if you've learned this before for ArcMap, all you got to do is just find where things are, minor differences, and you'll be off and running. So you can create your own tools and processes with Python as the back end, either through a wizard-like interface, or you can create things entirely in Python and use them. Desktop application markup language is really, really critical to the whole thing. So what happens is when you start ArcGIS Pro, the program actually reads a big long text file. It's about 50,000 lines long. It's called, it's probably got a different name, but when you dump it out to look at it, it's called combined.daml.txt. You can do this by just running at the command line and adding an argument, and you can see this file. And this is an XML-like language that Esri has created. And you can see just right from the very top, you've got some options and a reference, and you've got property sheet. If you go a little bit further here, right there, it says connect to an existing folder on the local computer. Okay, well, some of you might recognize that from the catalog window. Everything that you see in the UI in the way of these labels and things is defined in this big long text file. And so when the application starts, it reads this text file, and it's like Lego all over the floor. You just, I'm British, we call it Lego as opposed to Legos. You just picks up all the pieces it needs, pulls them all together, and it gives you what you see as the user interface. Right now, you can imagine that the styling for internationalization goes in here as well. So this could be in a foreign language at some point. So this is important, but it also means, what I've just described also means that ArcGIS Pro is a little slower to start sometimes, depending on your machine capabilities, your hardware. And so there's a trade-off there between the flexibility and the power of the application, which will be good for many, many years, you know, decades potentially, as versus the effort to load this thing and pull it all together and the hardware requirements. So there's a trade-off there. Now, when we create our own add-ins, so I mentioned this ArcGIS Pro SDK before, when we create our own add-ins, they have a little block of XML like this, telling the system what your add-in does and where to find the bits that make it work. And so when we create an add-in, that code just gets added to this file at startup, and then your stuff is automatically integrated. So ArcGIS Pro SDK for .NET. You can create these add-ins, but it's funny that you can extend the ArcGIS Pro functionality, and you could do that in ArcMap as well, but you could with a totally different library underneath. It's radically different. So that's an important point. You can't just take your existing ArcMap add-ins and bring them into ArcGIS Pro. They need a complete rewrite, okay? There's nothing you can do about that. It's just the way of the world. You can also limit functionality. Now, you can't call it a takeaway, but it's not just an add-in, it's a takeaway as well. So you can go in there and say, I don't want to see all these things, sort of a fancier version of customize the ribbon, and you could take everything away as well. That's another option, because all you're doing is you're manipulating that file that I just showed you. Now, configurations are a similar principle there, where you're doing what's called solution branding. These things started off as, I think, solution configurations. I've seen them as managed configurations as well. Now, I think they're just configurations. So if you see those terms, you know what I'm talking about. You can also do conditional or role-based customization. So depending on the user, they may see certain things and not other things. And so this little Acme Electric here, this is just an Esri image, is just, that's ArcGIS Pro right there. It opens up with a map, and it has a little option form down here, and that's it. So it's very powerful. And when you distribute, configurations and add-ins are separate things, but they're both distributed by this little file down here, just a little zip file. You double click on it, just like you did in ArcMap, and it gets installed, and off you go. So just to look at an add-in in the last few seconds here for me, this is one I created. I created this tab, GIS PD Utils. I've got a feature navigation button. That's all there is on there. And then if I click on that, I get this feature navigation form over here. It starts off like this. I can choose a map layer and then field name, and then off I go. I choose some values there, and then I can click a button down here, and I can do zoom to, for example, Snohomish County, and select it as well. And I could alternatively have a definition query. So that's a simple example of an add-in that's hugely powerful, because I can just navigate over features in ways that I can't do through the desktop. And that's just been a lifesaver for me for years. I can just press buttons, go backwards and forwards, and do all that sort of thing. So there's a great example of something that just streamlines my processes, but I couldn't do that with tasks or Python. I need to do the SDK thing for that. So thank you, everybody. Tips and tricks. I'm going to stop sharing now, and I'm going to hand over to Dave Jacobus, and he's going to carry on.
Thanks, David. Can you see my screen?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
Okay, great. Morning, everybody. Okay, so right off the bat, one of my favorite little, I don't know if it's a tip or a trick, but it's this, it's new to Pro. It's this continuous zoom. So if you hold down your right mouse click, you can almost yo-yo your zoom. So it's similar to the, it's just much more, it's much smoother than the scroll rollerball. It's actually quite fun, and I find myself trying to do it now when I go back to ArcMap or even like Google Maps. I'm trying to do this continuous zoom. So it's new with Pro. I haven't seen it in any other kind of map application, but it's kind of a nice little add that I like. Symbology, there is a lot of new symbology upgrades with Pro. There is instead of being in the properties, now they've got this whole tab, and there's just a lot going on there. And for the most part, for the better. But one little trick is in the past, when you would symbolize that all other values in your symbology pane there would be up shown. Now it's hidden, and you have to go into this more tab or more drop down and show it. So just an FYI on that. I'm not sure why Esri decided to do that, but it's still there if you need to show all of their values, but it's just in there. So just an FYI. Styles are new to Pro. These are similar to the layer files that we worked on with ArcMap. You can save them within your catalog. and you can create your own styles. You can make a point or some kind of symbology that you like. You can save it to your styles, and these are tied to your login. So whatever Pro document you open on whatever machine, as long as you're logged in as yourself, these will show up in that Pro document. And then you can also share them to the web. So if you've got a symbology set that you really like, and you want to carry that over to other things, maybe in your ArcGIS Online maps, you can do that as well. And it's easy enough to just finalize the look and feel of it in Pro and then send it off to ArcMap or ArcGIS Online. And there are a lot of different templates that Esri provides as well. People just continuously keep to add more and more of these show up. So there's a lot of point symbols. I particularly like, I work for a city, and a lot of those little government information point icons. I'm not a graphic designer, so I just appreciate the fact that these are out there that I can grab pretty easily and put in some of the mobile apps I've created or whatever. And then there's a lot of like these creative styles. They're more of a almost like a template for your entire map. So there's a lot of really creative ones in there, and there's a lot of real technical, nice looking ones. So these templates are already out there. So before you might think about creating a style, maybe take a look at these. That would be a good trick, good tip. Favorites is another new thing with Pro. It's in catalog. It's a little tab here in catalog. You can add whatever you want. So you can see here, I've got a database connection, a server connection, a folder, a toolbox, and it's as easy enough as just right-clicking on something in catalog and adding it to your favorites. And again, these are tied to your login. So whenever you log in as yourself, these favorites will be there for you, which is newer with Pro. So when Pro first came out, I don't believe this was there, and you had to kind of manually go in and add everything. It's just a nice feature to have now. So in ArcMap, remember when you would do your little geoprocessing and it would give you that little window, and then maybe you like stepped away and you're like, whoa, is it done? And I don't know, that was always a frustration for me. So now there's actually a window here, geoprocessing history window, that everything you've done, you can see whether it failed, whether it worked. You can go in and see all the details of that process that you've run. I'm happy this is here. It's been helpful for me. So the geoprocessing history window is really nice. Command search. This is front and center. So at the very top of your Pro document, you've got this little command search tool now, or window, and you can just search for anything. And it's very similar to the search button that was in ArcMap, but instead of being in catalog and having to find it, it's just right at the top of your document. So you can really search for whatever you might be looking for there, and it's not going anywhere. It's always at the top. So finally here with the tips, I wanted to, David mentioned the customize your ribbon. So this is actually a really big selling point for me and my users moving forward as we go to Pro. The ability to create our own ribbons or tabs and add existing and also new tools to those. So this is a quick example of how I created this. We have a process called door hanger. And so I created a custom door hanger tab, and I added my model that I created to run that geoprocessing process. And then I have just this existing export layout tool that I added as well. So my tab is really simple. I just have my two tools in there. But for the non-savvy GIS user who might use Pro, once in a while, this is really helpful for me, because then I can strip out all of the other tabs that they don't need, and I can really make their life less overwhelming, because when you open up Pro, there's just a lot. And so I just really like this capability, and it's really easy. Like I said, I made my model, and now I can easily just make a little space for it to live. Every time they open up the map, they don't have to scroll through our catalog to find it or whatever. It's just right there at the top. So Randy, thanks. Randy in his presentation put together a lot of these links, which is great. So there is a ton of documentation that not only Esri puts out, but continues to put out regarding tips and tricks, and also like what's new in ArcGIS Pro. So here's some links if you want to take a screenshot of that. And then moving forward, this is a segue. Next, I'm going to talk about migrating from ArcMap to Pro. So there's also a lot of documentation about that that's really helpful. So some tips and tricks and some migration links for you if you're interested in doing those things. So I work for, I am one of 1.5 staff that are in the GIS department. So we're a small GIS shop, but we support about 80 GIS users here at the city, and all of them have ArcMap currently on their machine. And we've decided that now is the time to move to ArcGIS Pro. And so we haven't done it yet. We're planning to do it in January of this year or next year, 2022. But we're in the process right now of putting everything together, setting everything up, getting the schedule ready so that everybody's comfortable with that move. So why now? And basically, we've just been waiting for Pro to catch up with all of the ArcMap capabilities that our users are comfortable with now. That has happened. So Pro and ArcMap are similar enough for users to be able to make that jump. It's not as painful as it might have been a couple of years ago. There's also a ton of documentation, like I said, which is really helpful for someone like me in a small organization to leverage for my users. So I can send them to videos, stepping them through, what's new in ArcGIS Pro. It's really helpful. And then also it allows us to, why now? We have an enterprise that's been set up, and I've been using it to develop tools, but we haven't migrated our users from ArcGIS Online to Enterprise yet. So we have a lot of users in Content ArcGIS Online. I've replicated a lot of that in ArcGIS Enterprise. And with Pro, we have the capability to take, the single sign-on, you can use your Windows login now to log into Enterprise and Pro. So when you log into your computer, you're automatically logged into Pro, which just eliminates a login for our users, especially for those that are in the field. It's really nice. So the planning stage, like I'm in right now, I've been talking about this with our users for a long time. So we have quarterly user group meetings. We've been talking about this. I've been asking them a ton of questions, which is really just a career. I mean, that's that is the foundation of my career, is just asking questions. What do they use ArcMap for? I have a good understanding of what my users use GIS for. And so that really helps me to be able to customize Pro for them. So we're putting together templates for them, like David mentioned. We're creating tools. We're creating new tools. We're recreating old ArcMap tools. All of those things we're doing ahead of time so that they'll be there for them, waiting for them when Pro shows up on the machine. So communication is really important. I've also asked a lot of questions to other people who have done this, just because we're not reinventing the wheel here. Like, a lot of people are doing this, and so learning from others and figuring out what worked and what didn't. It's part of the beauty of us waiting maybe a little bit so long, is that we've learned from some other people. But I do think right now is a really good time. So something to think about, at least for us, we have a lot of different types of computers out there that our users have. Some of them have plenty of hardware space, some are disk space, some of them don't. So something to think about. There are certain circumstances where we can't install ArcGIS Pro and ArcMap at the same time. The plan is to give everybody ArcGIS Pro and not necessarily take away ArcMap, but we'll still have ArcMap available if needed. But moving forward, we want everybody to have access to Pro. So, but in some circumstances, we're not going to be able to do that. We're going to have to make a choice. So they're going to have ArcGIS Pro, and we'll just make ArcMap available for them some other way. There's a little tool called the compatibility web app that's helpful that Esri has that'll like look at your system and tell you if Pro is going to work. It's a pretty large install. So it takes a lot of not only disk space, but processing power. So that's a nice tool for you to have. So definitely think about your machines if you are part of an organization, or if you're just if you want Pro on your own machine, you make sure that your machine is big enough to handle it. And then the Active Directory, also another thing that I mentioned earlier. No need for a login with that. If you can log in with, if you can use your Windows login, it's a nice thing to do with Pro. So we're not there yet, but we're getting closer. All of these things are in development. So we're creating custom add-in tools so that a lot of our users can just hit the ground running with what they used to do with ArcMap, but in Pro. We're working on the Active Directory. We're creating templates for each department. So planning is a little bit different than public works. And so we're creating templates that are specific for department uses. Training is, there's a lot of training online, but I also have the ability, which is really nice, where I can record a session like this and share it really easily with a lot of my users. So I don't have to keep repeating myself. I can just set up a nice site and have all my training there. And then we're also always creating web apps. In some cases, maybe where we have machines that aren't very big, we can replace Pro with just some custom web apps. So thinking about that as well. So that's all I have to say about that. And I'm going to hand this off to Eric to talk about enterprise.
Okay, thanks, Dave. Let me get this all launched here and caught up with where I am.
Okay, I stopped sharing.
All right.
Can I just say that when Dave decided he was going to use that picture of the inside of his minivan, he actually, if it hadn't been for the pandemic, John, I, and Eric would have been in the back of that car all going like this, you know, just to do that photo. But we couldn't do that, I'm afraid. So he got his kids and he paid them equity rates, apparently. So well done.
All right, come on, do it. I apologize to everybody. I am not a PowerPoint person usually, so I'm a little.
Well, after my start, you can get away with anything now, Eric.
Thanks, David. I'm trying here. There we go. All right, so screen.
Just gotta keep my head between these ships. There we go.
Why the heck isn't it not wanting to give the? I'm quite bad at this.
Well, Eric, do you want me to share and then you follow along?
I would love that.
But you've got a different slide there, but I can do that. That's fine. Okay,
Yes, please.
Right.
That would be fantastic. If anybody could. This thing is driving me nuts. I think the problem is I have too many monitors involved.
I was ready for your next session. Okay.
There we go. Okay. So the main thing that I'm going on about here is that this implementation of Arc Pro, it doesn't really happen on its own. It's part of an Esri application environment. There's Arc Pro has its fingers in dozens of other programs, just like those dozens of other programs have their fingers in Arc Pro. Sure, it can be used on its own. It'd be kind of difficult to share anything by itself other than printing. But in combination with ArcGIS Online as a store for data, and and enterprise on the internal side, if you're working inside of your firewall, in addition to mobile applications like field maps and Survey 123 and workforce and all that sort of thing. Arc Pro can also be the driver behind the services for your web or native applications. So yes, but Arc Pro does hold the whole environment together, and you use it to publish your first services and our author maps, and put hosted feature services up to ArcGIS Online or up to your portal. And it's important to note that 10.9.1 is the last opportunity to push those services from ArcMap. The libraries that drive it are being deprecated. John, am I correct in saying that?
Yes, it is. Sorry, John's on mute.
Yep. Okay. But the libraries that support ArcMap in this, overall web environment are being deprecated, and you get past it. It's time to go. We got to do it. So your services published from Arc Pro, however, take advantage of a lot of really helpful new features, and they allow they allow for greater use of symbology. They allow for a wider band of processing in addition to what they already had. And wow,
Hey, can you go back one slide?
Please
Yes,
do.
Okay, so the story about this next release of Enterprise 10.9.1, that will be the last time that the ArcGIS runtime, which is the technology needed to publish from ArcMap, that's the last time it will be in there as a default. Later releases of Enterprise will have an optional add-in that you can add into the Enterprise installation that will allow you to continue to publish from ArcMap for at least a couple more releases.
That's new to me.
That's new information. Thanks, John.
Yeah, interesting. Is that, John, is that a turnaround? Because everything at the UC suggested that nobody mentioned that. So is that a little secret that you've held for a while to look at?
No, it came out at Tech Refresh. I'll touch on it when we get to that part.
Interesting.
Well, that's good to know.
There you go. Carry on, Eric, please.
Okay. David, can I get the next slide again?
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you. Okay, so, but the tie between ArcGIS Pro and Enterprise or ArcGIS Online is becoming increasingly critical. Some tools are hosted in the Enterprise or on ArcGIS Online and don't run locally. There's the hosted routing geoprocessing tool is hosted in ArcGIS Online, and it's fantastic and it works really well and it's extremely fast. However, it does have to be, you have to have your log in there. You have to be able to get to ArcGIS Online. And then certain other things, namely parcel fabric. If you want to do any sort of multi-user parcel fabricing moving forward, there's gonna be portal involved. There's no two ways about that. You're gonna need to be pretty deep in enterprise land to get that all set up, unless you want to work in single user environment. So that's the way things are going. And so timing. Why now? The time is now. Do it now. Do it now. Just do it. We've reached functional parity with ArcMap and beyond, way beyond. There's honestly, I haven't touched ArcMap in more than a year at this point. I don't know why it's installed on my computer anymore. It's there because sometime in the distant future or in the near future, something might break that I have to look at it, but there's no good reason for me to look at it right now. The API, GIS API 4, the driving force behind all your web applications and web map and that sort of thing, it's not just on the rise, it's here. You have to go through a little bit of rigmarole to make the old map viewer your default map viewer in ArcGIS Online at this point, which that is a little annoying when you're stuck with old web app builder applications, and you're trying to build web apps and it keeps opening it in the new map viewer, and then you do stuff and it doesn't work. That's been frustrating, but the API 4 is losing the ability to read services published in ArcMap, sort of. I mean, you're not able to take advantage of all the stuff that it does. And publishing services through ArcMap will be deprecated after 10.9.1, except it won't be, because you'll have to install some weird add-on thing, as John just said.
Hey, Eric, Esri has a solution for that 4X business, and it's called Experience Builder.
It is called Experience Builder. When Experience Builder reaches parity with the Web App Builder, we'll talk about that.
I couldn't resist.
So here's the other weird stuff. Older mobile applications go end of life in December. This kind of came out of nowhere for people who weren't paying attention to it, but Collector has been replaced, and they're ceasing support for it in December. Field Maps is the new thing. It's actually quite good. We weren't exactly ready for it, but now we're in it. It's quite good. It requires you to use the JS4 map builder, and it will not work with classic map builder stuff. But it takes all those weird little applications that you used to think, oh, why aren't all these the same application? Well, it takes them all, puts them into one application. It makes sense. And it works really, really well on your mobile devices. It's not for Windows until Windows 11 and Android Windows fun time. So that's yeah. Sometimes your services just won't work in new stuff, and it won't tell you why. Surprise, surprise, if you publish them in ArcMap, sometimes things just don't work. Which it was very frustrating. I think that was David, you were working on that for was that Gray Harbor?
Yes, and yes, what happened there was that I was about to teach one of my workshops, and all of a sudden something that did work didn't, and the version of Web App Builder Developer Edition had advanced, and that was the difference. And if I went back to an older version, it was fine, which is what I did for the workshop. And then afterwards, I called Eric and I said, Eric, this didn't work properly. And I actually submitted a bug report to Esri Tech Support, and they didn't really understand why, and the solutions they offered didn't help either. They just didn't work. And it turned out that Eric, I think, was dead on, was that if you publish services from ArcMap, things don't work even with 3x now. Not just 4x, but 3x. And so that's very important. And there's no error message. You just bang your head against a wall and you call someone like Eric, and you just talk it out with people you know. And somebody might come up with the idea, you try it and it works. And that's another reason, a very serious reason, why you need to get in the modern world. And we joked a little bit there about Experience Builder and Web App Builder, but it's a tricky one with Web App Builder because of the lack of availability of some widgets. But Esri, I truly believe, is going all out to try to rectify that as soon as they can, and really give you no excuse to move into the modern world of the 4X API. And just, if you want to learn about that, I mean, I do have a workshop on it, but if you don't want to do that, I'm happy to talk to you about it. 4X is absolutely fantastic. It really is the modern world of JavaScript. It's excellent in all respects. And if you even want to go to TypeScript, which you can talk about another time, I do encourage that. So I hope that this business with Web App Builder resolves itself soon, so that you don't have the issues that Eric talked about with different map builder, map builder, I guess, whatever they call it, the map window in Enterprise and online. You don't have these issues of using different ones for different things. You need to get away from that. Anyway, there you go, Eric.
Thanks. All right, so another thing that is currently happening is a lot of you who work in local government, you may have funding streams to help you move along that you've never had before, and that you may never have again. There's weird CARES Act funding, and if you have useful or creative executives or finance people that help you get this stuff off the ground, and you can justify it in the world for COVID or all the rules that go into it, you can find ways to do machine upgrades. You can find ways to update or upgrade your licensing. There's all kinds of stuff that can come out of this. A lot of places have more money than they can figure out what to do with at this point. So you have things you want to do, ask them about it, and you might get it. And then the last part here, I think, is that the supporting tech around you is going to keep moving forward. Windows 11 is here-ish. It's going to be here-ish for a while, assuming it's not another Windows Vista or Windows 8 debacle. But as Windows keeps moving forward, things get deprecated. Libraries stop being included in things. Things start breaking that you don't understand why they're breaking. And staying up with Microsoft isn't going to stop because you don't want to switch to Arc Pro. So just keep that in mind. It will make your life more difficult. Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Eric. We're going to
you.
now switch to John. I'll stop sharing, John, and you can share now.
Okay. All right, let me share my screen. And you're probably seeing a blue screen at this point.
Yes, not that blue screen though.
All right, let me start my slideshow. See the what's new?
Yes.
Okay, I'll just move ahead here. All right, so well, first off, let me kind of explain how things work at Esri in terms of how we in the field get information. So basically, we have this thing called tech refresh, which in pre-pandemic days, what that meant was a bunch of us would go down to Redlands in the auditorium with hundreds of other people, and essentially for a week, all of the development teams would march in front of us and explain what they've been working on and what's coming. Yeah, it was, and then in addition to that 1 week there was an additional 40 hours of video that went along with it. Because of the pandemic thing, everybody's working from home for Esri for the most part. And so they videotaped everything. And the last tech refresh was this first week in October. So I went through just little bits and pieces of it that I could. There's tons more material to go through, which will take me months to do. But I cherry picked some stuff out related to ArcGIS Pro. So the new Pro is going to be out in a few weeks, sometime in November. And it's the 2.9 release, and it's got updates a number of ways. We're always trying to improve performance and productivity. I would not say that this release is a major release. To me, it's a lot of just kind of finishing up on the last bits of parity to ArcMap that needed to get done, and some additional cleanup for new data sources. So here, I'll just hit on a few of these things that you'll see. There's new clustering and some animated symbology, and I've actually got a little video snip I'll show. And new texting options. I think a couple of interesting things, the graphic to features, features to graphics. So anytime, I think this is something that people have been asking for some time. So if you've got a graphic that you're putting on your maps, you can create those into features and vice versa. So that's something pretty useful tool. A few things related to business analyst. That's not a whole lot of people use that in this community, but just be aware there's some new tools there. up the upper right there, share voxel scene layers. A lot of folks don't really know what voxels are. A voxel is a volumetric pixel. So if you're used to pixels in an image, 2D, voxels are the 3D equivalent to that. So it's for working with 3D spaces, basically. The linear referencing user interface, this is really, to me, we're finished with migrating functionality from ArcMap to ArcGIS Pro. Linear referencing was one of the, it had been in Pro to some degree, but we didn't have the full suite of tools that we had previously in ArcMap. Well, that's pretty much finished with the 2.9 release coming out here in a few weeks. And then PDF to TIFF. It's just another way to help be able to integrate different data sources into your projects. And these are more analysis-based things. So these are some new geoprocessing analysis that's been exposed. I think probably the most interesting thing to me here's one is the knowledge graph that allows you to see to map out relationships between different objects on the maps. Very cool. And then the cloud data warehouse. So this is we're putting into Pro the native support for connecting to cloud data technologies. And I think I've got a little bit more slides on this a little bit. So here I've got a little animation. So there's a lot of really wonderful stuff to see during Tech Refresh. And so there was like an hour-long session on just symbol animation. And I've grabbed a little bit of it here and I'll narrate over it. But essentially, we've now have the ability to work with animated symbols. So if you've got an object or a feature that you're symbolizing, you now can bring in a whole library of animations. And those things within the animation, you can affect their characteristics based on their values that are part of the feature. So in the case of the windmills here, what directions wind coming from, how fast is it? All of that can affect the animations. Pretty amazing stuff. So other things are showing here. There's different kinds of animation symbols we can use. We can use what CLTX and also animated GIFs. Here is a 2D representation. Previously, obviously, was 3D. So here they're putting little animated symbols on here, and they'll zoom in on an area. So these I'm pretty sure are GIF animations. And they're
great
modeling.
Symbol, that sun makes you happy. It's something about it, you know. I could do with one of those on my machine.
So that here they're modeling the Santa Ana winds, and this is the default direction. Now they're changing it to look at the actual field value as to what direction is the wind going. So it'll start reversing. So it's showing away. And so these will work in Pro. And I know they work also in 3D scenes on the web. I'm not sure that they work. I haven't checked it myself for 2D on the web. So here's a ski area, black diamond, blue runs, green runs, and they're showing basically here's the same data in a different representation using animated symbols. So that was what I could take out of an hour-long video to squeeze it into our little session here. Some other things to be aware of, I think, are pretty important. So we talked about ArcMap equivalency, and like I said, with the advent of linear referencing and disconnected editing, we are now equivalent, as far as I'm concerned. A little bit more about the data warehouses. So we're supporting these 3 right now. We're working on about 4 or 5 other cloud-based data warehouse technologies as well, but these are the big 3 anyway, the ones that folks typically are working with, but more is on the way. Mobile geodatabases. So we've had this for a while, but we've, let me skip ahead here. What this is all about is SQLite. So we can now pack geodatabases into a SQLite environment. And up until recently, this has been limited to simple features, points, lines, and polygons, which is the classic data types for doing GIS. And we're now able to support complex features. So complex features are feature types that are combinations of simple features. So those are how topologies and parcel fabrics and utility networks and trace networks, those are all examples of complex features, and we can support that at 2.9. Lastly, some updates on metadata improvements. So there's been kind of a reworking on the metadata stuff and support for new versions or new standards for metadata, particularly for European data sets. So let's just take a quick look at that. Roadmap. So this is a pretty common graphic. This is what was released in May. There's a newer one that I couldn't find online, but these are near term, midterm, long term. What that means is what's coming in the next release, what is the release after that, and what's the long term is 2 releases away. That's basically how you read this. So coming out here with the next release at 2.9, the things in yellow are included in here, but I'll let you take a quick look at this for other things that we're working on that you can expect for future releases. So to address some of the issues or that were obstacles we're going to get into, I'm going to touch on a couple of things about licensing. So licensing of ArcGIS Pro is pretty darn complicated. There are 3 different levels of functionality in Pro: basic, standard, and advanced. And then there's these 12 functionality extensions, things like spatial analyst and network analyst and 3D and all those things that many of you use, but many aren't aware of the 12 that are kind of the core extensions. There's even more beyond that that our business partners do, or that are royalty payments, royalty-based things that Esri has to pay for each license. We have to pass through the cost on that. So, but there's 12 that are out there that you can get access to. And the other aspect of licensing is confusing is there's a lot of different methods for licensing. When we first released ArcGIS Pro in 2015, the licensing methodology we moved to, it was a named user through ArcGIS Online. That was the plan, but then the user community complained and said, no, we like our concurrent use licenses. And so we kind of backtracked and we brought back the legacy licensing methodology that many of you have had and continue to use with ArcGIS Pro. It just makes the whole licensing explanation much more complicated. So basically, I'm going to blame the complexity on this on the user community. But essentially, there's different ways of actually activating the software, 4 different ways. Licensing types. Most of you working for government agencies, you have what are called perpetual licenses. So they're permanent licenses that will work as long as you want them to. But after you've purchased it, for perpetual licenses, there's an annual maintenance fee, and that's what covers your tech support and software updates and all that kind of stuff, and your ArcGIS Online access. Another thing to point is that every license of ArcGIS Map or ArcMap or ArcGIS Pro, that's considered the desktop technology. Every desktop license comes with an ArcGIS Online user account. So that's, and as Eric pointed out, that's because the system kind of works together with that respect. So perpetual licenses are what most of you are probably familiar with, but also understand there's term licenses. And so these are subscriptions. And we used to have, like 1 month, 3 month. I don't know that we still do that. I think the standard term license now is 1 year. But I can check on that to see. And then people ask us about the cost. and it varies. The cheapest license is the personal use license. And for those of you who are professionals, I think this is a wonderful way to have this to keep your own skills up. If you want to be able to, have a license at home for non-professional use things, you get full advanced with all of the extensions, all 12 extensions for $100 a year, plus an ArcGIS Align account. So I know a lot of folks that are, have a tough time trying to keep up with all of the how to learn new stuff at work. We have to get work done. But if you can work it in your environment, I really recommend that you have a personal use copy at home so you can just play and experiment and learn new stuff. A lot of things that what Davids and Eric have talked about. You can take advantage of that in a learning environment. So, and beyond the non-professional use, these are the costs associated with the product. So you can, if you are using just the basic license, it's $1,500, and the next copy of it is $1,350. So that's how this chart works on it. A term license for ArcGIS Pro is $800. So that is probably the cheapest seat for, 1 year approach. The extensions, same sort of deal. The one thing about the extensions though is if you buy individual ones, they are $2,500 a piece. But there's a point when if you're going to buy 3 of them, you should just buy the bundle of the whole 12. So it's a cost-effective way to get all those extra things. So the most expensive ArcGIS Pro seat you could get would be a what would it be here? Single use advanced for $14,000, and then add in a bundle of all the extensions. So add 14,000. What is that? $21,500 would be the most you would spend, and the least you would spend would be 100. So you can see it's a pretty confusing setup. Industry trends to pay attention to. So the big thing here is understanding that IT in general is moving everything to web service technology. And, we're reflecting that too. Certainly the pandemic situation has even increased this a lot. I work with local governments in Oregon and Idaho, and I'm starting to see, I won't say a stampede, but I would say that we're seeing momentum pick up on local government IT departments saying, you know what, we're not going to have server farms here anymore. We're going to have everything in the cloud. And as new generations of IT professionals come into those organizations, it's accelerating a lot. So I've got several counties that have just basically, they still have IT staff and departments, obviously, but they don't have on-premise hardware anymore for the back office. It's being done in the cloud, and that trend is moving in that direction. So other things related to this is that, because of the pandemic, there's been a lot of folks that used to work in the office, physical office space or an organization, of now working from home and may continue to do so. So we need technologies that allow you to do that. And Pro is built very well for that. ArcMap is not, because ArcMap doesn't understand natively at its core web services. Now, we've added on the ability to reach for web services, but when ArcMap was architected back in 1993, 94, 95, there was no such thing as web services, right? So we could not take into account how web service technology works. So even today, if you're using ArcMap and you're getting a layer that's coming to ArcMap as a web service, what's happening is that web service is being converted into a scratch file geodatabase on your local system for ArcMap to be able to understand it. That is a huge issue behind the drive from ArcMap to Pro, is being able to have the technology work directly with web services. So for instance, with Pro, you can edit a feature layer hosted in ArcGIS Online or Enterprise directly, rather than having to download the data. And you don't see this behind the scenes, but it's just at that level of the software that we had to do the redesign for this stuff. So that's big trend. Movement to web services oriented architecture and cloud-based IT infrastructure grows from that. Other things going on that I think it's important to understand is the movement of web service technology that you may be hosting in your own on-premise enterprise, or perhaps in your on-premise, or not on-premise, but in the cloud enterprise. Those things are now, some of them are migrating to software as a service. So Geo Event Server has been our enterprise-based real-time data technology. We've now added or created ArcGIS Velocity, which is a subscription service that you can set your real-time data feeds coming through Velocity rather than doing Geo Event Server. So we've made this capability that you can subscribe to, and without having to invest on the server side of it. And Geo Event Server is a pretty big lift to install. So Velocity may be a better choice and much more cost effective than doing it on premise or in your own Amazon space. Similarly, we just released this year image server, or image for ArcGIS Online, which is equivalent to a lot of the functionality that was in ArcGIS Enterprise with the image server extension. So this trend, and there's more going on, is that some of those things that had primarily had to be either on-premise or in your own private cloud, you have options now to add them on to the Esri cloud experience. But essentially think of them as add-ons to ArcGIS Online.
John,
so
are you close now? So we can.
Yep.
Thank you so much.
I just finished. So
thank you so much.
sharing.
All right, that's brilliant. Thank you so much. All right, I'm going to share. Right. So what we're going to do is we're going to go really quickly through our last piece, and we did have a section on audience participation. We'll skip that for now, I'm afraid, and you can blame me for that and the power company, I suppose. But we will go through these last few slides really quickly and then just wrap it up. So perceived obstacles. What we thought we would do here is have a little section on excuses, if you like. Because and I don't mean to be mean to anyone here, but there are a lot of reasons why you think you can't move away from ArcMap, and hopefully we've persuaded you that some of those are no longer valid, and that we've encouraged you to make a move as soon as possible. Okay, so the ribbon, for example, it's hard to find functionality. Well, we all thought that initially, but I've shown you, and Dave has shown you as well, we've shown you reasons why you can get around anything you can't find. You can move things around wherever you want. It's all there, and you just got to get used to it and put in the time, really. Python 3x, upgrading all my code from 2x will be difficult. No, for most of what we do as GIS professionals, unless you're doing really hardcore stuff, about the only complicated thing you might find is upgrading from a print statement, print such and such in Python, to a print function. All you do is add parens around the word and the argument, and that's it. Okay, that's the only thing I found going to 3x. So no excuse there. Maturity. Now this refers to maturity of the product, not ourselves. But ArcGIS Pro isn't a mature enough product. Well, yes, it is. It's been around since early 2015. No reason at all not to be using it. It does everything that ArcMap does, except for the parcel fabric, which will be out in about 2 weeks, something like that. Sorry, not the parcel fabric, the linear referencing. 2 more weeks and you're in business, okay? And there's way more to it. So, John.
Okay, so we talked about the licensing stuff. Acknowledge that there's a lot of options, which oftentimes when you have a lot of options, it can be a bit confusing. Cost, I gave you some ideas of what those were, list prices I showed you. I didn't get anywhere into the complexities related to having enterprise agreements, site licenses. That's what enterprise agreement means. Those are different kind of site licenses, and some of them include as all you can eat options. Some of the things are all you can eat, but you have to settle up after 3 years. So there's all kinds of different complexities related to cost. In terms of learning, it's just, boy, there's a lot of resources. There's a lot of things that are free resources that are available to you if you're current on maintenance. Those are the e-learning courses. And all of the MOOC classes, all that stuff is freely available to you as part of your maintenance. There's also instructor-led classes, and you know, as we move forward, there'll be fewer ArcMap-based classes and more ArcGIS Pro type things. So these are there's a lot of people taking classes with pros. So lots of resources out there. There's lots of resources outside of Esri. So there's a lot of folks that are out there teaching the new technology.
David.
Okay, so hardware, like I said, make sure your machine is big enough. And that's just a pretty, there's documentation online for ArcMap telling you what kind of machine it's looking for and all the technical specs for that. Arcade is just honestly fun. Personally, I like it. It works with across the whole platform. I'm not a programmer by background, and I've really kind of enjoyed learning Arcade myself, and it's really easy to just try it. And so I wouldn't really see it as an obstacle. I would look at it as a challenge and also something fun.
Guys, I got to run to my other presentation.
Okay.
All right, I'll cover your slide, John. All right.
All right, thanks.
Bye.
Also, I have been on the Wahooba app answering questions. There's a couple out there too. So I'm sorry we didn't get to answer all of them. But thanks for those that are on the chat and the questions, because we've got about 1 minute left. So,
All right.
and perceived obstacles, crashes. I mean, crashes happen, but I've found that Pro is pretty stable.
Eric. Okay, so I have a little bit more of the adversarial part of the perceived obstacles part. One of the perceived obstacles we have is, oh, you know, it's new and it's going to be a new thing right away. There's not going to be a new thing anytime soon. I mean, this is the same. This is the same mindset of, oh, we're not going to switch away from ArcInfo. ArcMap is short-lived. We're not going to worry. Just go. If you're afraid to learn new things, what are you doing with your life? Right? Just learn. Learning is all that we can do. It's too hard to learn. It's not too hard to learn. It's just something else. You learn to use new things every day. Stop being grumpy about it. I'm too old for this. This one is the one I hear all the time. And I see people retiring because they don't want to make the transition to Arc Pro.
Oh.
Okay. And if you don't want to be in this industry anymore, that's fine. But you could still learn it. You learned how to use the ribbon in like 2007 when they changed over Microsoft Office to the ribbon. It's not that bad, and you'll get something out of it. This is a big improvement. So
Absolutely, well done. All right, so closing. So David.
Eric said it. Now's the time.
Well done. Yes, absolutely. Got to make the move. So Eric.
All those things. I know we're moving really fast, but the main thing is ArcMap is dead. It's dead. It's dead. It's dead. You're never getting patches. You're not getting updates. You're not getting new functionality. Move on.
Absolutely. So John has quite a lot here, and basically pretty much what's here he's told us before. So I think I'll just go right past that one, but it'll be there for the record. So if you're not using ArcGIS Pro, start making the switch now. Absolutely. A gradual transition works well, so you can sort of be using both at once if you can. Dave described, can only have one machine, but I think a lot of us can have both, If you are using ArcGIS Pro, help and encourage others to start making the switch now. The best thing you can do if you get stuck is call someone you know. I call Dave, I call Eric, I call John, and I give them helpful advice that I've learned, and vice versa. And that's the way to do it. It's just help each other out. Consider your employability. This is a big one. If you lose your job right now and you don't have ArcGIS Pro experience, I can't stress this seriously enough. You're at the back of the line. You may not even get a look in. Okay, that should be an impetus for most of us as professionals to make the move. You're not going to get a job on the basis of ArcMap experience in most cases. There's always going to be some exceptions, but that should be your impetus. And if your boss or anybody else won't let you use ArcGIS Pro, pay the $100, get the home edition and start using it immediately and learning it, because this is the way it is now. This is the modern world and we have to adapt to it. So it's 9:33. I'm really, really sorry for my power situation and my Wi-Fi and all that. That was a bit scary, but hopefully you got something out of this. We will look at the questions if we can. And by all means, get in touch with any of us. Our contact information was on there at the beginning, and we'll talk to you all day about this stuff. We'll be happy to help you out. So thank you very much. And thank you to John and Eric and Dave for doing this. Hugely grateful. It's a real pleasure to work with these guys. It's not the first time we've done it, and it won't be the last. And fantastic. So thank you very much. And do let us know what you think. Thanks.
Thanks.